A man named Derek Calloway slapped his wife across the face on the live set of Family Feud, with 300 people watching, cameras rolling, and Steve Harvey standing 8 feet away. The audience did not gasp. They went completely silent. The way people go silent when something so wrong happens that the brain cannot process it fast enough to make sound. Steve Harvey's smile disappeared. His cards hit the podium floor. And before Derek Calloway could say a single word in his own defense, Steve Harvey did something that has never happened in the 45-year history of this show. He called for security. He called for Atlanta police, and he stood between Derek and his wife with both arms out wide, and he said 5 words into the microphone that the entire studio heard. "This ends right now. Right now." It was a Tuesday afternoon in February 2019, and the Calloway family had every reason to believe that day would be the best day of their lives. The studio in Atlanta was warm with television lighting. An audience of 300 people had lined up hours before to take their seats. Diane Calloway, 41, was wearing a yellow blazer she had bought 2 weeks before and pressed 3 times the morning of the taping. She had 3 children at home. She had a mother recovering from a broken hip in a rehab facility in Marietta. She had a second job. She worked on weekends cleaning offices. And she had a husband who had a temper that she had learned, over 11 years of marriage, to read like weather, which clouds meant rain, and which clouds meant something worse. But nobody in that studio knew what Derek Calloway was carrying into the building that afternoon. And nobody knew what would happen when the scoreboard showed a number he did not like. Derek Calloway was not a bad man in the way people imagine bad men. He coached Little League on Saturdays. He remembered birthdays. He could fix anything with an engine and never charged the neighbors a dime. But he had grown up watching his own father govern the household with volume and force, and somewhere in 38 years of living, he had never unlearned that particular lesson. And there was something else Derek was carrying that February afternoon that nobody but Diane knew. They were 8 months behind on their mortgage. The bank had sent the 3rd certified letter in October, the 4th in December. The modification application had been denied twice. The February payment was already missed. The house they had bought together in 2010, the house where all 3 children had come home from the hospital, was 4 weeks away from a foreclosure date that Diane had circled in pencil on the kitchen calendar and then erased so the kids wouldn't ask. They had applied to Family Feud 8 months earlier because Diane's sister had sent the application link at 2 in the morning with a message that said, "You and Derek would be so good at this, and you could use $20,000 right now." The prize money felt like a number written in another language, enormous, specific, real enough to save everything. Diane let herself believe it. She told her mother about it over the phone during one of the visits to the rehab facility. Her mother said, "Baby, God puts doors where walls used to be." Diane held on to that. She ironed the yellow blazer the night before, and then again the morning of, because she was the kind of woman who prepared for the best and made peace with whatever came. But Derek had not slept the night before. He lay next to Diane in the dark, going through numbers in his head. Property tax, car payment, the second notice from the utility company that was sitting face down on the kitchen counter so nobody would see it. He had told Diane the week before that everything was under control. She had looked at him the way she always looked at him when she didn't quite believe something but didn't want to start a conversation she wasn't sure she could finish. "I know, baby," she said. "I know you're handling it." That was the lie Derek had asked her to live inside of, and she had done it for 11 years with the quiet loyalty of someone who had decided that holding a family together was worth the cost of occasionally swallowing what you actually knew. The fast money round went badly. Derek went first. gave 5 answers in 60 seconds, earned 93 points. Diane went second. She needed 107 points from 5 answers to win $20,000. She got 81. The total on the board was 174 out of 200. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve Harvey stop the game. The scoreboard flashed. Steve read the number aloud. The audience made the sound they always make when the total falls short. A collective breath, sympathetic and polite. And Derek turned to his wife. And the thing that happened in Derek Calloway's mind in that moment is something no one in that studio could see or know. 11 years of fear. 11 months of hiding letters. 4 weeks until they lost the house. The mortgage. His father's voice. The yellow blazer. And then his hand moved. Diane did not cry out. She pressed her palm to her cheek and took 2 steps backward and looked at the floor. 300 people stopped breathing at the same moment. A sound technician in the back put down his headphones without knowing he was doing it. Steve Harvey's cards hit the floor. Steve did not speak for 3 seconds, which is a very long time on live television. Then he said, "Stop everything." Steve Harvey walked across the stage to where Diane was standing, and he placed himself between her and Derek. His arm was extended. His voice was quiet, which was more frightening than loud would have been. He said into the microphone, slowly and clearly, "This ends right now. Right now." He looked at the stage manager. He nodded once. 2 security guards were already moving. He did not look at Derek. He looked only at Diane. He asked her name. She said Diane. He said, "Diane, I need you to know that what just happened is not your fault. Not 1% of it." The studio was so quiet you could hear the stage lights. A woman in the 3rd row was crying without making any noise at all, her shoulders moving. The crew members who had been running cameras had stopped. One of the floor producers had covered her mouth with both hands. Steve held up his hand. There was more. He turned to face the audience, then looked directly into the camera, and he said, "I want to talk to everybody watching at home right now. I mean everybody. Because I need to say something as a man." He paused. "I was raised by a man who understood that a real man never, and I mean never, puts his hands on a woman. Not for any reason, not for any score, not for any money, not for any day." He stopped again. "And I have to be honest with you. Because years ago, I was standing in a situation that had me at the very edge of what I could carry. I was living in my car. I was showering at gas stations. I had nothing. No money. No house. Nothing. And I want to tell you something. Losing made me feel like I was about to go under for good." His voice cracked slightly. "But I never, not once, took that feeling and gave it to someone who loved me. Because that is never the right answer. Ever. The competing family, the Watkins family from Charlotte, had gone completely still on the other side of the stage. Rhonda Watkins, the grandmother who had anchored their team all afternoon, crossed the stage without being asked. She walked directly to Diane and put her arms around her. She didn't say anything. She just held her. Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, something hosts never do during tapings, and called Atlanta Police Department directly. He stated clearly and calmly that he needed officers to respond to the studio address. Derek was still standing at his podium, not moving, his face the color of someone who finally understood the full weight of what he had done. 2 Atlanta police officers arrived within 14 minutes. Derek Calloway was escorted from the Family Feud stage in handcuffs, on camera, while his wife stood next to Steve Harvey and did not look back. But Steve wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card. He called his business manager live on stage. He said, "I need you to set aside $20,000 from my personal account today for the Calloway family." Then he looked at Diane and said, "And that's not the show's money, Diane. That's mine, because you showed up today with courage I don't think I could have matched, and you deserve to go home to your house." He turned to the Watkins family. "And you. You came to play a game, and you ended up being the kind of people I've been trying to be my whole life. You're getting your $20,000 too." When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the footage of Derek being escorted out in handcuffs and Rhonda Watkins crossing the stage to hold Diane without a word had already been shared over 200 million times. The hashtag #StandWithDiane trended in 14 countries for 11 days. Domestic violence hotlines in the United States reported a 43% increase in calls during the week the episode aired. Organizations around the country credited the clip as the most widely shared moment of public accountability for domestic violence in the history of American television. 3 months after the taping, Diane Calloway's mortgage was paid in full. The house where her 3 children had come home from the hospital was no longer in foreclosure. Her mother, still recovering from her hip in the rehab facility in Marietta, watched the episode from her bed and called Diane immediately after. She could not get many words out, but the ones she managed were, "I prayed for a door, baby. God sent a whole building." A year after the taping, Steve Harvey established the Yellow Jacket Foundation, named for what Diane was wearing that day, with a mission to provide emergency housing funds to families facing foreclosure due to domestic circumstances. In its first 18 months, the foundation helped over 800 families. Steve gave a one-line motto to the foundation that he said came directly from Diane herself, something she said to him backstage after the cameras stopped: "A woman who survives does not become a victim. She becomes the proof." Derek Calloway was convicted of misdemeanor battery and completed a court-mandated domestic intervention program. He and Diane divorced. Diane's 3 children are doing well. The yellow blazer is framed on a wall in Diane's apartment. She told a magazine in the spring of 2021 that she pressed it 3 times the morning of the taping because she wanted to look like someone who believed something good was coming. She said that was still the right thing to believe. That yellow blazer, still pressed into perfect shape inside a frame on a wall in a house that was almost taken away, is not just a piece of clothing. It is the evidence that one act of public decency, one man stepping between a woman and harm and saying this ends right now, can ripple out far enough to give 800 families their homes back. And the real lesson of that Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta is not what Derek did wrong. It is what every single person in that studio did right, including the woman in the 3rd row who cried without a sound, including Rhonda Watkins, who crossed a stage for a stranger, including Steve Harvey, who for one moment stopped being a television host and started being a human being. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the thumbs up button. Share this with someone who needs to know that speaking up, even when your voice shakes, is always the right answer. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for another person in a moment when silence would have been easier? Let us know in the comments, and ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us what we're all capable of when it counts.